Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's my religious greeting, which means basically, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Mr. Moderator, fellow panelists, and friends, all praise and thanks is due to Almighty God for allowing us to meet and discuss during these very challenging times. Indeed, we are grateful for this opportunity compared to many parts of the world that are really in strife. I pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and to the elders past, present, and emerging. I'm very briefly going to just outline to you the main concept of Islam. I'm going to outline to you where ICQ fits in the broader spectrum of Islam in Queensland and how COVID has affected the practice of our religion. So basically, Islam is based on 5 pillars. The first pillar being a declaration of faith. In other words, as soon as somebody says, I declare or I bear witness that there is only one God, and I bear witness that there are many prophets that brought the message of God to humankind. And so we believe in all the prophets from Adam and Eve, Abraham, Noah, David, Jesus, and finally Muhammad. As soon as a person says that, we regard that person as a Muslim. And you don't need an audience to say that. That's in your heart. That is a personal, direct communication between you and your Creator. So the first pillar is that declaration that there is only one God. The second important pillar is what we call salah or prayers. We pray 5 times a day, 365 days a year, without fail. Yes, there may be times when you are sick and you can't pray, but you can pray sitting or standing or laying on the bed or in whichever way, but you've got to pray. If under circumstances you can't, you're allowed to catch up on the prayer. But once you reach the age of puberty, you have to pray. That's a requirement, it's compulsory. The other important, or the next pillar is the one of zakat, what we call zakat. And I'll wind up by bringing how we got around these things during COVID. Zakat means charity. We are obligated as Muslims, regardless of whatever taxes you pay, whatever donations we make, we are obligated, I'm giving you very rough figures, 2.5% of our net savings per year, per annum, must be given towards charity. The next important pillar is one of Hajj, which we call or refer to as the pilgrimage, takes place once a year. And that's where we travel to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia, and we do our pilgrimage in Mecca. And this is basically following the rituals set down to us by Abraham and his son Ishmael. So we do those rituals. It's over a period of 5 days. You get about 3.5, 4 million people gathering in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca, and 4 million people doing the same thing at almost the same time. So you can imagine the logistics and how all this fits in, and it still happens. Yes, we do have some tragedies sometimes, but these things do happen. And the final pillar of Islam is one which we call or refer to as Ramadan or fasting. We fast approximately 30 days in each year, in each lunar year. And the fast is from sunrise to sunset, where we don't have anything to eat or drink from sunrise to sunset. So those are the 5 pillars of Islam. In terms of Islamic Council of Queensland, we are made up of a number of societies or organizations, non-profit organizations, be they charity organizations or Islamic societies of different mosques, or Islamic Women's Association of Australia that provide different services. So these are all registered organizations. They have to be registered with either Office of Fair Trading or ACNC before they can become members of Islamic Council of Queensland. So representatives from each of those organizations, we have 23 in Queensland, starting from Gold Coast in the south, going right up to Cairns and Toowoomba in the west. And you got about 14 or 15 just in Brisbane alone. And then Toowoomba, Rockhampton, Gladstone, Mariba, all those places, each has an organization or more, and they come together and elect every 2 years the executive membership, 11 of us. Sometimes you say, why would you take it on as president? But it have suckers for punishment, I suppose. So we go with that. So we represent about 50,000 people, Muslim people in Queensland from the various different mosques. The impact of COVID on the religion itself. Now, as Muslims, our rituals, our prayers, everything that we do is extremely communal. It's always a collective participation. For example, if you pray 5 times a day, we learned and we know and we believe that to pray in a mosque, in congregation, that prayer has much more reward than praying alone at home or praying anywhere else alone. So we make an effort to try and get to the mosque. So as foreigners, when we come into a new country, the first thing we will ask is, where's the closest mosque? And you'll tend to find that we'll most probably rent or buy a property as close to the mosque as possible. Or people would start settling in an area, and the next thing they're praying in a garage or praying in somebody's home, and then they'll collect funds and try and buy suitable premises. So, you know, like in any other religion, for example, Christianity, whether it's Hinduism, you have your temples, you have your churches, you have your synagogues, and it attracts people together. It brings unity, it brings that togetherness, it helps support one another. And this during COVID was extremely missed. We missed it to the maximum. For us especially, if we go 5 times a day, and suddenly for the next 9 months, you're hardly meeting the people that you met at the moment we'd pray for in the morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you know the regulars. I'm not saying every Muslim goes to mosque and prays, but you know the regulars, you miss them. Some of the elderly that sort of, the association with the mosque because they've got no family or friends, and that's the only place they could come and meet. So for them to stay away from the mosque became a difficult issue. And we had to handle that in terms of, I'm also at the Gold Coast Mosque. I've been the treasurer there for 20 odd years. So you do get involved. So we took it upon ourselves to at least drive or phone and visit these people so that they're not so lonely. So that's what happened. During Ramadan, now what happens during that particular month? We eat in the morning and get to the mosque for morning prayer, and then there's nothing else during the day in terms of eating, but you still get to the mosque either at midday prayer, mid-afternoon, and then at sunset prayer, that's when we break the fast. Now, in the past, in most mosques in Queensland, we would provide meals for the people that are fasting. So at the Gold Coast Mosque, during the week, at least 350, 400 people would come to the mosque, break their fast, go and say their prayer, and then come down and have a meal. And that's open to anybody. So we used to get a lot of students from Griffith University campus coming along as well. They didn't have to be Muslim to come and enjoy a meal. On the weekends, we'd get around 12 to 1,500 people coming to break fast, because what happens is we sort of got into a system. On the Gold Coast especially, we got 60 different nationalities of Muslims. So there's certain big groups. For example, the Bangladeshis, the Pakistanis, the Indians from India. There's a big group of South Africans. So over the weekend, each group selects a day and they prepare their national meals to break fast in the evening. So you'd get all their people invited from Brisbane or wherever. So used to be pretty big, pretty huge. COVID came and we had to put a stop to that. We couldn't, the mosques were closed. We couldn't do anything. So somebody came up with a bright idea. That's fine. We will still cook, but we will pre-pack the food and it will be a drive-through session. So we got over that aspect, and we still, in fact, we gave out more meals because people found it convenient. They could come at 3 o'clock or after school when they pick the kids up, or when they come for midday prayer, pick up their pack, eat it at home, and then come to mosque for the night prayer. So, that happened. We still fed many people, and we got over that for Ramadan. And some are saying, even when COVID goes away, we'll continue with the drive-through because there's so much less cleaning and always in any organization, it's only the few that will do the work. So that happens. And then the other big thing, at the end of Ramadan, when it's the last day and then the next day is the start of the new month, we have what we call Eid, a day of celebration, just loads and loads and loads of food. So ICQ would organize the collective prayer at the Islamic school in Karawata because they have a big hall and very big grounds. We'd get 10,000 people just for the morning. And there's one family in Brisbane, the Dean family. They actually cook the day or the whole night before, and they feed those 10,000 people in the morning. And we couldn't have the Eid prayer for that day. We couldn't even have it at the local mosque because of the numbers. So they still cooked, and they did the drive-through lunch on Eid day. So, people that have no families or no friends still had a meal to eat. So we got over that in terms of Eid day. Birthdays, weddings, funerals, all were impacted. At one time, we only allowed 10 people to a funeral. And same thing with weddings and birthdays. And that affected all religious groups. And I was in the fortunate position that we worked with the Queensland Federation of Religious Organizations, and we did submissions to the government. We met a number of times with Queensland Health, Dr. Jeanette Young, what a marvelous person. And, they worked with us as religious groups, not as individual religions. And we said, well, we're happy to social distance within the mosque. Same thing with the churches, hand sanitizing, all those things. Gradually, as it was relaxed, they informed us of the relaxations. They discussed with us before, and we followed that to the T. So, thankfully, government did what government did, and we were all, as Queenslanders, every one of us was protected. So again, we thank the government, we thank God for allowing us this opportunity. Further impacts came with the isolation where, many people lost their jobs, many students lost their part-time jobs, they couldn't go back home. Many of them come from poor families, especially from the Asian countries. And it did become extremely difficult. So the mosque and multicultural associations in Queensland and in Gold Coast got together, and we provided meals for these people. We, to an extent, we're still doing it today, that some of them are still battling, and our mosque, and we work with the churches as well. Our mosque is on a road in Allied Drive. It's a very, all the religious organizations, the Serbian church, the Chinese church, we all on the same road. So there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of working together. And that's one thing COVID did, is brought us all together, regardless of religion, regardless of race, regardless of culture. It brought us together, and we could support one another. And that was, I think, extremely important as a community. With the self-isolation, the elderly, as the previous speaker said, became an issue to support the elderly, because some of them can't drive, they couldn't get to their GPs, families couldn't visit them, so somebody had to take that role, and we found people who were willing to do that. Mental health issues became a big problem as well. And I think going into the future, it will still also be a problem. I'm conscious of the time. Am I gone too long, Mr. Moderator? Yeah. I think.
I think you should finish.
Okay. Just in terms of our role in terms of the handling climate change and our earth, Islamic leaders have called on the world's 1.6 billion Muslims to play an active role in combating climate change and have urged governments to conclude an effective universal climate change agreement in Paris at the end of that year, that was just before the Paris meeting took place. Faith leaders, senior international development policy makers, academics, and other experts made the call in an Islamic declaration on climate adopted at an International Islamic Climate Change Symposium in 2018. The leaders called on government meeting in Paris to bring their discussions to an equitable and binding conclusion, bearing in mind the scientific consensus on climate change, the need to set clear targets, the dire consequences of planet Earth if we do not do so, and the enormous responsibility on our shoulders and for the rest of humanity, including the rest of us, in protecting God's earth. Thank you very much.